Okay, while we have Akshay already here who is going to be setting up his system, let me take this couple of minutes to reiterate the goodies and the gifts that are going on in today's conference. Lots of goodies, lot of gifts around in all of the stores. Turn a wheel, answer very simple questions and win big prizes. There is also a panel discussion question, so you could submit your questions for what is the role of a leader in DevOps, right? Well, that's the theme for the panel discussion. You could submit your questions and you could win a prize for one of the best questions. Then tweets obviously has the wonderful prizes, the Kindle Paperwhite and the Echo Show, and DOIS 19 is the hashtag for that. And while Mr. Akshay is going to set up his system, I'm going to introduce him, take the pleasure of introducing him. Akshay Anand, he is the product ambassador at Axelos, working on the development of new guidance and research within the IT service management portfolio. He has previously advised Fortune 100 clients on how to improve their ITSM capabilities, implemented tool sets such as Remedy and ServiceNow, and headed up global ITSM activities at Macmillan Publishing. He is a regular speaker both at the India and the international forums and has delivered several talks and keynotes. Today he is going to talk to us about what do we do with a problem like ITSM. So first we acknowledge ITSM is a problem. That's how Akshay is going to drive us through this talk, and then we are going to get into the talk.
That's fine as well. All right, 30 minutes on the clock? Okay, clock's already ticking. All right, let's turn this on. And it's not moving forward. This is mine. Do you have an alternative? Oh. Where do I have this one then? Or did you put this one in? All right, thanks. All right, so this is me, ITSM Product Ambassador. You can ask me anything you want to ask about ITIL 4, ITIL version 3. Outside of service management, my interests are comic books and heavy metal, so if you want to ask me anything about that, fine with that as well. So I want to start off with a small story that, this is an actual conversation I had with my 5-year-old daughter a couple of weeks ago. And we were headed to a restaurant, and she said, "Daddy, there are two types of people who work in a restaurant. There's the cooking people and the giving people." And I said, "What about the cleaning people?" He said, "Oh yeah, I didn't think about the cleaning people." And that's a very typical type of conversation I have with a lot of people in the DevOps world, where they see, they recognize the developers, they recognize some of the front-end business people, but they don't recognize the glue that holds the whole thing together. They don't recognize all the other work that's going on in the restaurant to be able to produce the food, to be able to create the experience for the customers. And that's where service management comes in. But as I talk to people, I realize that there are as many interpretations of what service management is as there are parts of the elephant. I'm presuming people are familiar with this story, but I'm happy to explain it if anyone wants. Raise your hands if you want. All right. The story goes that you had 7 blind men, each of whom was touching a different part of an elephant, and based on what they were touching and the experience of what they were touching, that's how they're defining the elephant. So the man who was touching the trunk thought that the elephant was a long snake. The man who was touching the leg thought the elephant was like a tree trunk. So depending on who you speak to, their experience of service management has defined the entirety of service management, without recognizing that it's actually made up of many, many different things. So let's take a pause very briefly and talk about what is service management. Service management, first and foremost, is the management of outcomes. When you're using an app to pay a bill, the outcome is for you to be able to pay that bill. It's not the use of the app. Service management is concerned with you being able to pay the bill, not about you getting an update to an app. It's ensuring that value is created for all stakeholders. Now, the all stakeholders is a really important point. We need to recognize that it's not just the customers that need value. We need to be able to create value for senior management, for our suppliers, for regulators, for tax authorities, for all these different parties in the ecosystem. And so we're trying to create value for all stakeholders. Service management is adapted to the needs of the organization. We heard earlier today about how you don't get DevOps in a book, you need to find your own DevOps and so on. Service management has been like that for many, many years, but we've had a generation of practitioners who've basically looked at books and just copied stuff out of books and said, this is what service management is. The other thing that a lot of practitioners can always forget is service management is continually improved. ITIL version 1 back in the early 90s was talking about continual improvement long before lean and agile became a fad. And long before lean and agile now have dominated the mainstream. But service management tends to be connected, in legacy worlds, service management tends to be connected to project funding, which is why continual improvement is very often forgotten about. And the last, and this goes with ensuring value is created for all stakeholders, service management is about being empathetic. It's about putting yourself in the shoes of other people and understanding what those people are trying to get out of your organization. It might not just be a customer, it could be regulators who need proof that you're following all the proper laws and policies of the country you're living in or working in. It could be suppliers who want to get paid on time. It could be, I don't know, your facilities cleaning staff who want to make sure that they're able to do their jobs done as well. It's about recognizing this whole system, recognizing the ecosystem. So what is service management not about? And here we have the laundry list of what everybody loves to complain about service management. So I'm sure this is all very familiar stuff. It's about approving every single change in a cab. Service management is not about hiding behind SLAs. It's not about managing infrastructure and service desks. It's not about managing tickets. It's not about processes being copied out of a book. This is everything that's wrong with the service management world today. And I say that as an Axelos employee working to promote service management around the world. This is what service management has become, and this is as far as it can go from what the core of what service management should be. So the question is, do we still need service management in this high velocity environment, in this DevOps world? And I would argue that yes, we do need service management, but service management of tomorrow has to transform and evolve from where it started. And the analogy here is that a lot of people, when they think about a car, thought about a faster horse carriage. And what I'm saying is the car was not a faster horse carriage. The car was a completely new technology which disrupted the ecosystem of the horse carriage world. And just like that, we need service management to break free from its roots. We need service management to transform into something that's fit for purpose for today. Part of that is recognizing that all parts of an organization cannot work in the same way. Now, in multiple conversations, in a lot of literature in this world, we see this concept of, everybody must be agile. Our whole organization must be agile, or the whole organization must adopt DevOps, or whatever it might be. But that doesn't work. And we've seen some spectacular successes. We've seen some spectacular failures. Togo in his keynote earlier today talked about how they are now very high-profile business cases, high-profile case studies of how digital transformations have failed. And that's because people try to apply this one-size-fits-all approach to transforming their entire organization. But I'd like for a moment to think about a clock. Think about an analog clock. We still have those around, right? It's one clock face, right, that tells the time. But behind that clock face, you've got many, many gears and cogs and other parts all moving at different speeds. Not all of them are even rotating. Some are going tick-tock. But at the end of the day, it's one clock face, right? So we have to recognize that our organizations are made up of many, many different parts which move at different speeds and in different ways. But at the end of the day, we are still one organization. Okay? So just like I hate bimodal IT. We cannot create this world where we have dinosaurs and unicorns in our organization. Some people, Simon Wardley being one of them, he talks about a trimodal system. Pioneer Settlers Townspeople is his model. And it's a good model. It helps surface some very interesting conversations. But we can't put a number on the different ways of working. We just have to accept that there are many ways of working, but not try to constrain it to 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 or whatever that number might be. And we should really, really need to stop talking about the one framework or the one tech to rule them all. No framework in the world has been designed to solve all the organization's problems. Business relationship management frameworks are addressing a different use case than service management frameworks, than something like COBIT, ISO. We're all trying to address different things, and the challenge is how to integrate them. We have to stop thinking about this one framework, one silver single bullet that solves all the issues in our organization. In fact, to the DOIS 19 people, I would issue a challenge for DOIS 20. Let's not promote it as a DevOps conference. Let's actually promote it as a high velocity IT or something like that. Let's move away from framework centricity and talk about how we solve organizational issues. The other thing that we need to be able to do is to understand the ripple effects in our organization. The ripple effects that our technical decisions have across the rest of the organization. Hopefully some of these examples will be familiar to you guys. So let's say we move to the cloud and we recognize that we move to a utility computing model. So we are spending less on capital expenditures, less on CapEx, because we're not deploying servers in our data center. Instead, we're spending more operational expenditure. Or actually, somebody told me recently, it's not called OpEx anymore, it's called RevEx, revenue expenditure. All right. But is this use case familiar to you guys? We're spending more OpEx than CapEx now, right? We're all comfortable with that. But what effect does that have on our organization? For most people, they'd say, well, that just means I have to balance the budget slightly differently. That's great. But beyond what you're doing, it means that the organization, the enterprise we're working in, has to change the way in which it's providing financial governance and how it's reporting its financial forecasts to the market if it's a publicly traded organization. This has impact to shareholders. Right? So a simple thing like we need to move to the cloud has major downstream effects the further you get away from it. Another use case, we're moving to the cloud, so we need to right-size our change control. More standard changes, less cab, all that sort of stuff. Great. But the moment we do that, we need to help other parts of the organization understand that there are going to be impacts to compliance and therefore governance policies, which means that we have to change how the way in which we conduct external and internal audits. Again, changes our relationship with regulators. But the problem is, as technologists, we tend to see everything that's not in that blue circle that blue section that I just drew. We see our rebalancing of OpEx and CapEx. We see change to some of our processes. We don't see the downstream effects that it has. And we need to start asking these questions. We need to start understanding these downstream effects. We need to start increasing the scope of our understanding. Now, we might start with just saying, right, I'm a product team and I've got a customer. I'll stand here. I'm a product team, I've got a customer. So let's start increasing the scope of our understanding. I've got operations. I've got customer support. I get more and more complex. I get more and more complex as I start to reach outwards more and more. At some point, you've got to be able to say, all right, that's the limit of our investigation. We're not going to get any major returns on investment if we continue to investigate all these linkages. At some point, you stop. But the point is, we no longer think of ourselves as a product team and a customer. We see ourselves as part of a very complex organic network, literally, that is working together to create value. Which brings me to something that I would encourage everyone to look up on Google and read through. It's a concept called service dominant logic. Now, it's derived from a series of academic papers by University of Arizona, University of Hawaii, I think. Vargo was Arizona, Lush was Hawaii, I think. Maybe the other way around. But series of papers on this concept called service dominant logic. Absolutely brilliant stuff, absolutely boring to read. But there are some blogs out there which take those concepts and make it very, very readable. But it's amazing stuff. It is very powerful stuff. And now I'm going to start slowly edging into what ITIL 4 is about, so I'm trying to hold off on that as much as possible. But service dominant logic has several key principles, which I've highlighted a few. Service is the fundamental basis of exchange. I've had this conversation with a few people at this conference already. You guys presumably have an app on your phone that allows you to, a banking app, yes, allows you to pay bills, etc. Anyone does not have a banking app? Raise your hands. Okay. All right, I'll use the analogy then. So the app is great, presumably. It allows you to do stuff, it's cool, it works on your latest smartphones, etc., right? But the value that you're getting is not the app. The value you're getting is paying your mortgage, it's paying your rent, it's paying your electricity bill, whatever, transferring money. That's the value. That value is coming from a service. The value is not coming from the app, right? So service is the fundamental basis of exchange, and value is determined by the beneficiary. So you are getting some amount of value, your bank is getting some amount of value, but the bank is then passing some of that value to its suppliers, the payment processing people, for example. Your smartphone provider is getting some value because it's increasing the desirability of that ecosystem. So there are many people, many beneficiaries from that single transaction, some of which are under our control, many of which whom are not under our control. The other key point that I want to highlight is the co-creation of value. Value is not delivered, value is created, and it's created through interactions. So it's only when your bank is able to process your bill payment that you have submitted that value is being created, right? The bank cannot process a payment on its own, and you might send a request in to pay a bill, but unless it's acted upon, no value is being created. So value is co-created through a series of transactions between consumer and provider. Again, all this stuff is discussed in service dominant logic. Really highly recommend that you just look up the phrase and start reading some of the blogs. It is really cool stuff. So what is IT service management in this new world? Taking all that stuff we've talked about, service dominant logic. IT service management, to be successful, it needs to be a mediator of conversations across between all stakeholders. So service management is not about managing technology. Service management is not about controlling the rate of change to applications or websites or whatever. Service management is a mediator of conversations and a broker of agreements between these stakeholders. It's the connecting tissue, if you will, between the regulator and your organization, your customer and the organization, your suppliers and the organization. Even within the organization, service management offers that common platform for senior management to understand what's happening at a technical level, for technologists from in different teams to be able to work together. So service management is a mediator of conversations and a broker of agreements, and it ultimately becomes an enabler or a facilitator of outcomes. It's not a controller. It is never meant to be a controller. And in order to do that, in order to increase our scope of understanding and so on, we have to take a systems perspective of things. We have to understand all the different parts that we need. And this is something now I'm actually going to talk about ITIL 4. This is, has anybody here done ITIL 4 Foundation, read about it, anything? One person, two, okay. ITIL 4 introduced this concept called the service system, or service value system. It describes 5 components that an organization needs in order to convert opportunities or demand from existing customers into value for one or more stakeholders. So we've got the guiding principles, which is how do we approach work, how do we approach making decisions, a common set of rules for the organization to work. We've got governance, which is how do we evaluate, direct and monitor our performance at an organizational level. We've got the service value chain. I don't talk about it in this deck, but I'm at the booth. I'm happy to talk about it at length if you need. But the service value chain, it's the activities that we do in order to convert opportunities to demand. We plan work. We engage with the stakeholder. We build service components. We operate service components. We look for opportunities to improve, etc. These are activities that allow us to convert opportunities or demand into value. We've got practices, which is what do we do in those activities. This is where some of our traditional service management thinking goes. So this is practices include things like change control, incident management, request management, and so on. We use different components of these different processes or practices in order to create the activities that we talk about in the service value chain. And the last is continual improvement. How can we become better? 5 seemingly simple components, but all of which come together to create an organizational system that allows you to work in an effective way. I'd like to take one more slide to talk about guiding principles. There are 7 of them, and I'm not going to discuss each one at great length. But these are recommendations on how to work or how to approach making decisions. So focus on value. What does value mean to your customers, to other stakeholders? Start where you are. You've got an existing environment. You may think that you are a startup, for example, but you have something that you're starting from. You're not starting from purely, a ground level, but you're starting from where you are. So start from where you are. What do you currently have that you can reuse that will be beneficial in the new way you want to work? Collaborate and promote visibility. It's not just about peer-to-peer visibility. This is yes, it's visibility of, for example, operations, understanding what changes are coming down the pipe. But it's also visibility of your senior management knowing what's happening at the ground level. It's about your developers having visibility about the corporate policies that govern how they're working, or informing them what they can't do, as it were. So focus on value. Yes, value is important for stakeholders. Lean and agile literature talks endlessly about value for customers. But who are all the other stakeholders that the system needs to be able to cater to? Progress iteratively with feedback. Lean and agile ways of working, we know this, but from a service management context, it's about how do different teams work together. I mentioned the clock analogy. How do we make sure that the whole clock does not break down with gears spinning away and sort of the whole clock breaking apart? Everything needs to be able to come together, mesh together well, and work together. So how can we do this in an iterative, if people are working in an iterative way? I mentioned promoting visibility is not just peer-to-peer visibility. It's about top-down and bottom-up visibility as well. Keep it simple and practical. I'll come to this on the next slide a little bit more. I believe we should be extending the concept of minimum viable or minimum marketable to service management as well. Anyone come across the phrase minimum marketable? Do I need to explain that? If you want me to explain that, even one person, just say, raise your hand, I'll explain it. All right. Minimum marketable is the minimum set of features that your customers will buy into. So minimum viable tends to be the minimum set of features that we can learn from, but minimum marketable might be more than just minimum viable. You might need to have more and more features before the customer will say, yes, I'm willing to engage with you at this point. Minimum viable might just be, I don't know, a web end front screen, a website front login page. But minimum marketable might be, well, okay, but what happens when I log in? What do I see? What am I able to do? That's minimum marketable. So, extending the concept of minimum viable, we now start to see organizations and people talk about what is minimum viable service, what is minimum viable service management, what is the minimum set of features that my service needs to have in order to deliver the required outcomes. What is the minimum set of features and tools and so on that my service management needs to have in order to keep things up and running? So let's move away from the book says I need to have these 100 steps. Let's talk about, well, what are the 5 steps I need, and if I need anything else, I'll selectively invest in it. We can adopt a minimum viable approach to services and service management. So as an example, how can we iteratively improve minimum viable change management? I have 7 minutes. Let's open this up as a panel discussion, group discussion. If I had nothing and I need to get some change enablement, change management in the old days, change enablement in, what would I have? What would minimum viable change management in a completely greenfield environment look like? If you had nothing else, what would it look like? Literally starting from scratch. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Sorry, who's that? Culture change. I'm talking about what we used to call change management in the ITIL V3 days. The managing the change to components. technology components. Sorry, I should have clarified that. Change requests, okay.
And then the decisions to implement CAB.
This is CAB. Okay. CAB is a minimum viable.
No, not
Okay. All right. No, everybody has a different starting point. There are no wrong answers. Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh.
So prioritization of the change.
Prioritization, okay.
The customer or the market needs.
Okay. These are all right answers. Any more before I show you what I put down? Process definitions. Okay. Any other takers? Roles, responsibilities. Also good. Going in. Sorry. Documentation. Okay. All right. That's a good one. All right. Let's move on. I'll show you what I had. Unless anyone has anything else. Going in 3, 2, 1. All right. What I had. Who's doing what to what and when? Just a calendar. Just put it sticky note on a calendar on a wall somewhere. What are you doing to what and when? Once we have that and we improve how we're registering this, if we detect clashes, how do we prioritize what change we do first? Once we refine that a bit, what's now pre-approved? What do we have, or rather, what do we have to seek approvals for based on the riskiness of changes, based on all the data we've had up to this point? And then lastly, let's look at some automation. Does that logic make sense? Again, this is my logic, but does that logic make sense? As a minimum viable approach, I start with just understanding what changes are happening and then looking to control downstream. For those of you who think this did not work, this is what Bill and his team do in the Phoenix project. But I swear I came up with this completely independent of the Phoenix project. But this is what happens in the Phoenix project. So this can work. I've done this in the past. So key takeaways as we come up to the end. Don't be dogmatic about using just one framework. There are many, many frameworks out there that each been designed to address a specific use case. Service management needs to fundamentally transform, rethink itself on how it operates in a mixed mode or high velocity environment. Again, back to that clock analogy, recognize that different parts of the organization need to work in different ways. There's no point trying to force everyone to work in 2-week iterations. Service management, IT service management specifically, is not about infrastructure, service desks, incident management, change management, managing tickets, and so on. It's not. It's about managing complexity, it's about empathy, it's about mediating conversations, and it's about consensus building. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Akshay. And before we move to the questions, because I'll request you to connect with Akshay post the session during the lunch breaks and the coffee breaks and networking session. Akshay has an opportunity to ask 2 questions for which we have prizes to give away.
Okay.
Let's see how attentive our audience were from your presentation for this, to be winning these goodies.
All right, I'll make this really simple because it's coming up to lunchtime. I'm sure everyone's hungry right now, right? So we all want to get out and get lunch. At the start of my talk, so shame on you if you weren't here at the start of the talk. At the start of my talk, I talked about something that, a conversation I had with my 5-year-old. And she mentioned that there were 2 types of people in a restaurant. Name the first type. Cooking, all right, she gets it. And name the second type. Giving. That's it. Thank you.
You can come here. Meanwhile, you can ask the second question.
Oh, those were the 2 questions.
Oh, no, she answered both of them, so.
Okay. So I have to come up with a second different question. Okay. What was the name of the truly awesome, amazing paper that I talked about at great length for many, many minutes?
Service dominant.
Yeah, you had it. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry. I tried to give the 2-part question, but. Yeah.
Your name? Sri. Please come on stage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. maybe you want to
I
come
suppose
this
we
side.
have to pause for this.
Come a bit here so that it's easier to take photograph for you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not sir, please.
Yeah. Sweet.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Big round of applause for our winners. And Thank you, Akshay. A big round of applause for Akshay as we facilitate him. We have Divya, who is here to thank Akshay on the DOS community here for the wonderful talk
you.
and sharing your experience with us. Yeah. Akshay, you have a moment also. Allow
Oh,
us.
wow. Wow, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Divya. Thank you, Akshay. Thanks. Guys, I know it's a lunchtime, so you have the time. Tweet, win prizes, and don't forget to drop your questions for the panel discussions in the Excellent Row booth. Thank you and have a wonderful lunch.